Do you guys think there's a widespread racism and police brutality in the United States today? Do you guys think that's like something that is actually the case? And also, is this if that is the case, is it an American phenomenon, or is it something that can be applied to other countries, or can describe other countries as well?
I don't know. So yeah, first, I guess it depends what widespread means, because we all know none of us like police brutality or racism, right? Or race-based police brutality. We all kind of think it's wrong, right? But I guess the question is, what is the frequency and what do we mean by widespread? But I kind of like your question about comparing America to other countries, because that kind of because like when you say widespread, often it's widespread relative to what. So I think comparing to another country is kind of a good benchmark. But yeah, I don't know whether it is more or less. I'm not sure.
Well, widespread would be like averaging. Is it, are they treated the same as white people, or are they in most cases, or in half the cases, or in some of the cases? Like I think it's a matter of average. And I think that what we're finding out because of the protests and I mean the data and stuff like that, I think it is prominent. I think it is widespread. I think it is absolutely a problem that's definitely extends beyond Minnesota, and it's always been a problem. It's always been that way. Whether or not it's better is the big question mark. But I think it's definitely there, and it's definitely been a problem for a very
Vladimir, help us
very long.
out.
Yeah.
What are the minorities in Russia?
Minorities in Russia. I actually don't know. I don't pay attention to this problem. And in Russia, sure, police treat some groups. We don't have black and white here, but we have lots of people who come from these countries of former Soviet Union, and there are lots of gastarbiters. I don't know how to say it in English. It's just people who like cheap labor.
Mm-hmm.
So they come from countries where they can't where they can find work, but here they find like work, and they're treated as kind of not law, but kind of, I don't know how to explain it again. Some people who are underprivileged, and usually they are also treated by the police in a kind of negative way, but it's not a big problem. I mean, in America, for example, just everybody talk about it, and it seems as it's like a real problem. But here, it's not so it's not so big problem. But I'm not sure. It's like, again, I don't pay attention too much to what's going on in this, since there are lots of cases, I guess, in news. They talk about it a lot of time, but I don't watch news. In my environment, it looks as if everything is quite good. So I'm living in kind of fool's paradise. So I'm not interested in this, and I can't find, for me, you can find lots of evidence of what we call police brutality, or some negative treatment. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's difficult because Russia is a lot more homogenous than the United States, and like for example, in my case, I spent like my whole life before coming here, almost most of my life I spent in Europe, and and even in Europe in general, which does have more immigration than in Russia, and more in different ethnicities, Western Europe, but it's still not like the United States.
No.
The United States is a multiracial society. From the beginning it was, and it's kind of different. I think it's still very valid to compare it, and it illustrates how the situation is, what the situation is like, so I do think it's comparing things makes us realize, like Michael was saying, right, like what's the degree of this, what's the degree of racism, for example. If you look at other countries, how does that compare? But obviously, there is a reason why racism is the peculiar problem that it is in some places and not in others. It's because in the whole thing, how American society was created. I mean, you had essentially three different groups of people, and one of them was superior to the other two in the hierarchy of the society, right? You had Europeans at the top, specifically English people, and then you had everybody on the bottom, especially slaves and Indians. So that was the foundation, right? So even today, I think, and it is relevant to speak of how things are today. Today, in theory, everybody has the same rights, right? But yeah, there is a history that might condition this. The history of before, 100 years ago, especially like 150 years ago, Europeans had a different standing in society than slaves did, or Native Americans did, right? So that might still condition things today.
Yeah, it's a tricky question. Like when we say, so there's racism, there's police brutality, and then there's racism causing police brutality, right? And we say like how obviously those are all issues. Any case of it is not a good thing. So when we ask, is it widespread? What will widespread mean? So yeah, we could compare it to another country.
And Michael, I do like that you brought up that question, because that's something that, because most of us were based here in Minnesota, and Minnesota has kind of become the epicenter in the world, like incredibly, for this whole issue of racism and police brutality. It's kind of a shame that now people will know Minnesota as the place where racism and police brutality happen. It's kind of an odd thing, but we've had all these cases. But I think the first question that maybe is interesting to ask, just to try to kind of like untangle these things, is there really like a strong link between racism and police brutality, as far as we can determine that? Because maybe we can't really see it, but what do you guys think? Are those things necessarily linked? The police brutality and the racism, are those as linked as, because people talk about, the police killed a white policeman killed a black person, so that's racism, right? So I'm not saying that that's not the case, but it is. I think it's a little bit harder to untangle them.
Yeah, this is how I sort of framed that, just based on events that have happened in Minnesota. I remember about a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago or 12 years ago, there were two incidents that are close to each other, maybe close enough for me to remember one when the second one happened. The first one was this happened in outstate in the northern town, I think, and there was a schoolboy, I think it was 13 or 12 or something, and he had a gun, and he was sort of threatening it and threatening with it. And I do remember that the policeman did not reach for his gun. He actually got injured, but he chose not to go through the lethal route and was able to talk down and disarm this schoolboy. And then a few months later, maybe a year later, there's this young 13-year-old child, Vladimir is a Southeast Asian population or tribe which has a lot of immigrants that have come to Minnesota, and he was being chased by a policeman, and the policeman shot him because he thought he had a gun and was going to shoot him, and then it turned out to be a pen or something, and so there was just, I thought of it, yeah, there's empathy for one, not much for the other. Why is that so? I don't know. Maybe the circumstances are different, but I also think human nature, you tend to understand better if you think the person is from the same ethnicity or cultural background as you're from, and if not, you're a white American and the person you're chasing is Hmong, different ethnicity. Maybe there are different assumptions, different levels of what you feel safe doing, and is that racism or not? But at the very least, it's the difference in races, I think,
When it comes to
mattered
the death
in those
of
outcomes.
barely a teenager, like the question, like the distinction matters,
Mhm.
It matters whether that empathy is there, or
Right.
you're talking down a pubescent child out of using the gun that
Yeah,
somebody gave them.
right.
Somebody showed them where it was. Like, they don't have the emotional capacity to be shot. Yeah, I think that, yes, that's racism. And the thing is, like, it keeps happening. Like, young teenage boys that are not white keep getting shot. Like, I haven't heard about a white teenage boy getting shot, but I do keep hearing about when they're not white. And if they were white, you would hear about it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's possible, yeah, but I'm not sure if we would necessarily, because do we really hear about everything that happens in the media, right?
You hear about it when it happens to white people, that's for sure.
You hear about it?
We're just starting to hear about it when it happens to people who are not white. And that was kind of the thing that's been happening for generations, is that stuff wasn't even published. It wasn't even sometimes even recorded. And those are real things they're finding out.
So I have a question, and I would be very interested in everybody's perspective on this. Is racism worse than it used to be? And if so, why?
No, I mean, it's certainly not worse. I mean, the United States, for sure, it's not. Because, I mean, the benchmark was very, very low, right? We're talking about a society that slavery was legal in the 19th century. And, there was, I don't know why people don't refer to the situation in the United States as apartheid, because that's exactly what it was until the 60s. So, I mean, if you compare it to those benchmarks, I mean, no, I don't think, I don't think that would be like, I don't think that's an argument that anyone can make, really, that it's worse. I mean, maybe it's worse than 10 years ago. I don't know. Maybe you could say that, but or 5 years ago, maybe, but not historically. I mean, historically, I don't think, clearly it's not.
Right.
But just because it's better than it used to be doesn't mean doesn't necessarily mean we shouldn't be doing even more. The question is, should we be doing even more? I think that's where the whole debate is. Like when we say, is it a serious problem, or is it widespread? I think what we're really asking is, do we have to invest, like, I don't know if it's more money or more resources, or do we have to punish racism harder? Do we have to make more of an effort as a society to combat it, or are we making a sufficient effort? I think that's the question most people ask, because no one, or very, I mean, the large majority of Americans think racism is a bad thing, So it's all kind of this murky sort of discussion about degrees and what effort should be taken, kind of is the question.
There are certainly some, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all right. Go ahead.
I was going to say there are certainly there are some. I grew up in North Dakota, and I was raised that to believe that racism doesn't really exist anymore. So every once in a while, my dad and I go kind of at it, and
But I'm sure you knew it exists somewhat. It's a matter of degree, right?
No, I didn't.
But like, do you think there's
honestly.
not one racist person in the whole U.S.?
Well, okay, no, I knew. Sure. So I knew.
Well, can you clarify that a little bit? Like, what do you mean, like racism did not exist?
Right.
What
So,
does that
okay,
mean?
in North Dakota, there aren't many people of color.
Mhm.
And, you know, for me, like, I was friends with everybody, and my parents taught me to be friends with everybody. But it wasn't until I became an adult when things turn, like I started learning things weren't the way necessarily that I was told they were. Even in North Dakota, it wasn't, you know, it's not as simple as people. Some people don't know. They don't know what they do. They don't know that they're saying. They'll say, "I'm not racist. I just think this way because of my experience," was something that I'd heard. It's like, okay, well, when you put your guard up, whenever you're around a person of color, you're racist. And they just, there's a lot of people who don't think that way. They think that they have experience. They think that they are just being wise and cautious and stuff like that. It's like, well, when it has to do with skin color, that's what it is. And so to be able to determine the level of racism that we still have is actually really hard, because for most of the time we haven't been willing to look at what it really means. We haven't been willing to investigate it because we don't want to investigate ourselves. We don't want to be potentially a culprit.
Right.
And we don't want it to be us because we think we're really practical and we're giving everybody a chance all the time. And it's only the people who are, you know, Nazis. I'm not a Nazi, so I can't be racist. But I think just the fact that we're ignoring the exploration of what that really could mean is kind of erring on not enough. I think we have to be willing to take it seriously if we want to have any kind of impression that we might be doing enough, is to actually look at it, actually research, actually believe people who have been researching it.
I completely understand what you're saying and what Michael was saying earlier. And I may be going off on a tangent here, but it seems to me like things like the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act and all of that, laws are very important and we need to have laws. But ultimately, what has to change is not laws, it's people's minds.
Yeah.
And laws don't, they might help, but they don't do that. That's done in conversations like this one, in my opinion.
I think it has to be a full court press. Like, yeah, laws by themselves won't change people's minds. But then on the other hand, dismantling something like the Voter Rights Act also is not helpful. You know? And so, yeah, it should be a full court press. I mean, part of what's gone on in the last maybe 5-10 years is that the people who have traditionally been subject or suffered from racism are speaking up more, you know, and they're saying, well, this used to be okay. I used to just keep quiet about it. Not anymore. Maybe the new generation is just saying, no, there's this whole thing about microaggressions, and a lot of people are saying, oh, you're just too overly sensitive and all that. But I can get a glimpse, and even though I'm still a person of color, I don't think I have an idea what it feels like to live in a society where when you walk down the street, everyone locks their car doors as you walk down, and the assumption is always the negative, and just to live in a place where you have to confront that every minute, every I can I can only begin to imagine what that feels like, and so for people to say, I'm just tired of all these little things that keep telling me I'm not as good as the rest of you, and these, I try to understand. I try to put myself in their place, and I know I can't fully understand it, but that's something that has to be understood when people say, oh, you guys are and maybe try to understand why they feel that way, and maybe the problem of when people say this cancel culture or these overly sensitive to microaggressions, it just might go away too, and something part of the ongoing heightened conversation, I believe, and I'm I talk to my kids, and sometimes I just shut my mouth, because sometimes I feel that they are overly conscious of things like what pronoun you use and things like that, and I just choose to try to understand.
What do you mean by that? I didn't quite.
Overly conscious of pronouns, like he, she, they. My daughter corrects me when I use the wrong, because it's just force of habit. I'm not used to using they as a.
What do you mean?
It's a new implementation in schools to be more to allow more acceptance of transgender,
right.
especially, and
non-binary
non-binary.
Who's they? Like a transgender person?
Yeah.
As opposed to assuming somebody based on their appearance identifies as female or male.
Yeah.
But they can't call anyone he or she?
They ask to be used they when you refer to them. Don't refer to me as a he or a she, just
until you've confirmed with them.
Or they just prefer a pronoun, third person pronoun that is gender neutral, that doesn't identify the gender of the person. And I grew up speaking a language where the third person pronoun is gender neutral. And I know
very helpful.
The effect of that is my first few years here, and I still do it. I'm all over the place when I say he, she. I say he when it's a woman, she when it's a man, and sometimes I get it right. And I just realized when you're using a language that has where you don't have gender neutral pronouns, you are always thinking of the gender of the person you are talking to or you are talking about.
Well, I mean, I grew up speaking, Portuguese, and everything has a gender, not just people.
Right.
A lamp, a table.
Same for all Romance languages, Latin, based language.
The same in Russian.
Yeah.
And they say that
neutral.
German as well,
neutral in Portuguese, so
that actually affects a lot how people think, because I think it was like in German the word for bridge is female, but in Spanish it's male, and they asked Spanish speakers to describe a bridge, and they described it as like strong, sturdy.
Yeah, we're not capable, like people with languages like that. Apparently Russian is the same way. I didn't know that, but we're not capable of doing that. Like we
No.
have to like think in a like artificially, because well, if you learn how to speak English and English becomes a language that you're accustomed to, yes, okay, you learn it, but like naturally, yeah, if you speak a language that everything is a male or female, you of course you're going to attribute those characteristics to things.
Now, my understanding is that in New York City, there are 36 recognized genders. And one of
What are the other 34?
Don't ask me to name them. And
That-
one of the people who was talking about this on a news program, and this is just an anecdote, it's not necessarily how everyone views it, said that gender is a spectrum. So if it's a spectrum, there are more than 7 billion genders.
An infinite.
And it's not just degree, that some say it's also like, yeah.
So how do we know what to say?
No.
Yeah, I want to go back to kind of something.
yeah.
So yeah, Natasha talked earlier about people's sort of natural defensiveness. Like when it comes to examining our own biases, you know, we have a sort of defensiveness. We don't like to admit that we have certain biases, right?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah.
My question is, how do we know what's the difference between possibly examining our own biases and maybe reading too much into it and thinking that we have these thoughts that we don't really like? Is there like a degree where it's like, is there a point where it's good to examine your own biases, and is there a point where you're over examining and now you're reading into things, kind of creating a story that doesn't exist, I guess?
Well, and we do know about implicit biases,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That I think we should just admit that we do have implicit biases. I grew up in a country that was an American colony, and the thing about colonized peoples, even several generations down, is that they sort of adopt the prejudices of their colonizers. So I have implicit bias against Blacks. It's the culture I grew up with, because it's something that, you know, 50 years of American occupation brought to the country, my country, and was sort of imbibed by the local. You can't help it. It's there. And so if you're there, you want to identify with the upper echelon of society rather than the lower echelon. And because the upper echelon, they use the bad words, you know, to describe African Americans. And so that attitude was imbibed maybe subconsciously. And if I do the Harvard test for implicit bias, it comes out. I'm implicitly biased against African Americans, Blacks, but I take it as people who are on their conscious thought are trying to do the right thing. I'll just take it as face value. I'd rather take, you know, people at face value for what they say and what I see they're trying to do, and maybe that's a good starting point for how to deal with the fact that all of us have our implicit subconscious biases, and I think most of us are trying to surmount it.
I agree. I'm sure we all have biases and we all have prejudice, and we should strive to overcome that
Right.
wherever we can. And I look forward to the day when the color of a person's skin is as insignificant as the color of a person's hair,
Yeah.
you know. And to me, if an advanced alien culture contacted us and we were to crow about our accomplishments, all of the things that human beings have done are overcoming their self-created
Right.
problems, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, we
in my opinion.
create a lot of problems for ourselves. It's
Yeah, we do.
but it's, I mean, we're very imperfect creatures. I mean, we can't help it really. We're like monkeys, you know. That's not something
Yeah.
that we can really help.
Is that we're like chimpanzees. We're not bonobos.
Yeah.
You know.
So we're the more aggressive type of monkey, really.
Mhm.
I was going to go back to what Dave, I'm sorry, because I know you commented about gender, right? And I sort of took the conversation away, but I wanted to tie it back sort of to what I was saying. Yeah, how do you know, when it comes to gender, you know, people are told to like examine their feelings, like, you know, do you feel male? Do you feel female? How do you feel about your own identity, right? And some people come up with lots of sort of like some people like gender fluid. They say some days I feel like a male, some days I feel like a female. And you know, there's other kinds of different sort of agender, you know. So my question is like, to what extent is that a real thing, and to what extent is that sort of reading too much into it and coming up with like a narrative that doesn't reflect the actual reality? Because I'm sure for a lot of people it's a real thing, right? Like, but how do we know? I don't know. Like, is it a real thing for most of them, or like, yeah,
I,
I don't know.
I don't know if this anecdote addresses what you're driving at or not, but
Yeah.
maybe it will.
Yeah.
But my wife and I recently went to see David Sedaris, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with him, but he's a gay writer, comedian. He does presentations and all that. And he got up and he started talking, and he started talking about the gay community, and he said there's LGBT, and nowadays they're LGBTQ,
Yeah.
and the Q stands for questioning. And he said, I'm sorry, but if you're not sure, you don't get your own letter.
Okay. Hold on.
So
I'm gonna
is
talk
it-
about.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So personally, I can say just a little bit about this. I grew up born female, but for a good portion of my life, well into my 20s, I felt pretty androgynous and like asexual. The reasons why I don't exactly know why, but I would have dreams where I was often a man rather than a woman, and I would be in relationships, and but I never practiced anything. So can it happen? Is it real? Like, yeah, it's definitely, it's very real. And it's like, when you're the person going through it, there aren't a lot of guideposts.
Sure.
You know, there's religion, which was kind of what dictated the relationships I chose. But should religion be the deciding factor in your sexuality? Like, no, absolutely not. So it's gotta just be a personal journey and choice, because from experience, it is totally possible to have just no indicators of which way you're supposed to identify, and some actually very confusing subliminal messages that
So are you offended by David Sedaris's comment?
what?
Are you offended by David Sedaris's comment?
Who is that, or what was the
He
comment?
just said that if you can't decide,
The
if
cue.
you're questioning, then you don't deserve a letter. Which is
Right. Well, I'm not offended. But I disagree. Like,
right.
I disagree because I've been there.
Yeah.
And I think trying to tell somebody, well, you have to decide now. Like, when is the due date?
Mhm.
When,
Yeah.
like, when is the date when you're supposed to have decided? Does that mean like it's a go, no go? Like, what?
Yeah.
You don't have to make those decisions in like any other point in life. So why would you suddenly have to at some point be like, well, I have to decide which gender I'm going to be by the time I'm 21, otherwise I can never, like, I think putting a restriction on your identity of all things is like the last thing you should do. Like,
right.
give people a cue, let them figure it out, because it's their own damn selves.
Yeah. And
It's not oppressing anybody to
right.
let people be neutral, be undecided.
Right. Plus, for those of us who are pretty secure about what gender we are, we probably cannot appreciate the agony, the distress that people who are not either sure or find themselves in a category that is not sort of welcomed by society. And I just put it down to compassion. The suicide rates for gay, lesbian, and just the non-traditional gender suicide rates for the people confronting this I would call it problem, this situation is very high. And so I just, even as a matter of compassion, just, if I don't have a problem, if you can't decide, I'll wait. And it's true. Like Natasha said, it doesn't matter to me. Doesn't affect my life one bit.
It's not like they're wrecking anything.
Just I'm sorry to cut you off. I mean, I think that's yeah, I mean, those are very valid points. But just going back to like what you guys were talking about, the implicit biases and the explicit biases, because I think that's an interesting thing to cover. I think that I'm not convinced about a lot of the things that people have been saying about some of these issues. And I'm not saying I don't agree with them, but I'm a little bit confused about it. So I want to talk about it a little bit. Like the fact that, for example, like this last incident in Minnesota that happened, that this woman shot the black kid.
Yeah.
Like, people have been saying that this is racist, right? But I watched the video, and I cannot truly say that I see that as a racist thing, and you guys might have a different opinion. I would be interested to hear it. But what I do see is a police officer making a mistake, egregious mistake, certainly, and shooting a person that she did not want to shoot. But
Right.
And she's white and he's black, right? Or she's of European ancestry and he's of African ancestry. But I mean, is that racist? Like, maybe it is. But if it is, I think it's certainly like an implicit bias case, right? It doesn't seem that she wanted to do it in the first place.
No.
I think that much seems pretty clear.
Yeah.
Unless you're being very partial about it.
You mean
my-
Dante Wright, or I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
The last case, yeah.
Yeah, Dante.
Not the full case.
Where
My-
she shouted taser,
Well,
right?
I don't think that's
Yeah.
maybe that's the last one that we've heard about in
Yeah,
Minnesota, but I've certainly heard of some since
sure.
then.
My counter argument,
Sure, yeah, like
to
the last
that-
one in Minnesota, yeah.
yeah, is that how many white drivers get stopped for having a what you call this, air freshener hanging from their rear view mirror? You know, I live in Eden Prairie. That's a suburb, a very white suburb of already a very white metro area. And I think when I see,
Is that why he was stopped?
yeah,
I didn't know that.
it's for some minor traffic violation. And when I see a car,
Which smells like an excuse after the fact.
yeah. When I see a car stopped in the highway and with a police cruiser right behind it,
Mhm.
the number of times that the driver, and sometimes it's a perfectly good looking car, brand new or whatever, in good condition, not a junker or anything like that, the frequency that the driver is African American is much higher than the African American proportion in Eden Prairie. And I think that's the case in Edina. And I've had some person tell me that the suburban police departments actually are very strict with African American drivers because they want to discourage African Americans from driving through or being in their city, in their department, you know. And so that's a context that we cannot disregard with Dante Wright, I think is his name. You know.
That could be an interesting social experiment for people to actually, like we use apps for all sorts of things, for there to be like an app for people to record who they see being pulled over, as opposed to, or just record when they've been pulled over, and see what the metrics end up being just for pullovers, not citations, not, for people to personally be recording that stuff rather than relying on law enforcement to be doing it accurately and releasing everything and all that kind of stuff. I think that could actually be really, really helpful indicator of what exactly we're dealing with. Magnitude.
And that is a good point, Raul. But I think that, like, what about the actual incident? Because I think for me, you might be right about that, but I can't, like, I have no way, right? Nobody has any way of seeing, like, how true.
I believe that it was an accident. I believe that she thought she was pulling out her taser and turned out to be a handgun, and that's happened several times. So I also discount when people say, "Oh, can't believe that." I think she really wanted to shoot him. He did that.
People that say that clearly did not see the video and thought about it.
Yeah, and it's anger too.
That it was a mistake.
But what we were talking about with implicit bias and where that would possibly come to play in this incident would be, yes, it was an accident, but if it were a white person, would she have taken a moment to make sure it wasn't her gun? And that would be a probably, that would be a big probably. And that's where it ends up is.
To me, if a person doesn't know which hip they have their gun on, as opposed to their taser, they have no business being a police officer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And she was in the 20 years as an officer.
Obviously, she made a mistake, but that could have happened to any
after 20 years of experience.
No, like that does
in your hand.
What I'm saying is that that would have happened. Well, how should I put it? That's not really the question that we're asking, right? That's like the question is, she made a mistake, right? I mean, if a different question is, how did she make a mistake? You know, like, yeah, you guys can ask that, but I don't know the answer. You know, I don't know the answer of like, how did she mess up? I mean, maybe she probably doesn't know the answer to that question, right? She obviously made a terrible mistake. But the question that we're asking here is, was that mistake, or was she using the gun or the taser? I guess in her mind she was using a taser. So was she using the taser because he was a black person, or was she just using a taser because she wanted to control the situation?
Yeah, so I think what you're asking is did the color of the person's skin
Yeah.
have undue influence on her reaction?
Right. Yeah, that's what I meant. Because the fact that she messed up, you know, with the taser gun thing, I mean, yes, I mean that much is clear, and yeah, we can, you know, but that's not really the question in terms of the racism.
Like, did she use a taser at all, or was trying to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
No, I do believe that the color of the driver affected her, even if only in a subconscious way. And you know, these are the hardest things to get rid of. That you know.
Because like, for example, in that case, and this is unpopular. I think it's unpopular because people want to be on the right side of this.
Mhm.
But like, I also think we should look at the reality of things. You know, like in the Floyd case, the reality of it is that at least, you know, he was being, you know, the cop was not acting, was like using too much force in that situation. He wasn't like, he was completely disregarding like the well-being of the person that was on the ground. I mean, there were a lot of things that were wrong with that video, right? But this last one of her making this mistake,
Yeah.
it doesn't seem unreasonable, other than the mistake itself, which is horrible. Like, in that case, it doesn't seem unreasonable that, in fact, the cop trying to arrest him was himself of the same ethnicity. He was African American, I believe.
Right.
So, like, I just don't see, like, if there was racism, it was implicit racism. But even then, I mean, wasn't it reasonable for her to try to tase him, right? Like,
Yeah.
he was someone who had a warrant, and he was trying to basically escape from the cops and get into his car and drive away from the
Right.
cops. I mean, that is I mean, that is not like, if I did that, I'm pretty sure I would get tased. You know,
Right.
I think
But
Michael would get tased, and you would get tased, Natasha. I mean, most people would get tased. You know, if you're trying to
I don't know actually
right,
what's
get into
the
car and drive away. I mean, that's, you know, that's something you do in video games, not in real life, right? I'm just saying this. I don't want to like come from a biased perspective. I'm just talking about, in this case, for example, the fact that people are jumping into the conclusion that this was a racist incident, to me, seems a little bit unclear.
yeah,
I
I
don't
would
know
I would
what
agree
the,
with it.
like, what do we know what the application for tasing
Yeah.
is? And like, I feel like they don't have any. I've never heard of anyone just being like, yeah, out of the blue, I got tased, or so and so was something they use a taser first. Like, I know they're equipped with it, but honestly, I've never heard of it being used. So I don't know when
But
exactly they're
if
trained to
it
use
is
it.
going to be used, though, I would imagine it's in those situations, right?
There's also the thing that I think if the driver was a white person, the relation, what his views, what's in his head will be different from what an African American would be feeling in that situation. True. Because he's definitely scared for his life. You know, he's scared that he might do something. And this is a 21-year-old kid, 19-year-old kid, first car. You know, we all know about 19-year-old kids. They're not really thinking straight yet. Judgment is the last thing that develops in the human brain. And he probably just lost it, panicked, tried to run off. The same kind of mentality that armies like with 19-year-olds when they tell them to go run up the hill against that machine gun nest, and that was the whole history of race relations in the United States went into that, and yeah, it's a tricky situation.
Well, days before the trial, you have to wonder if the reason that he was trying to leave was because he was scared for his life.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's basically, when you hear the stories and you hear the accounts, that's what you hear, is that they can't call the police for even help because they could end up just being shot. They could end up losing their family. It's a real concern. If the police are around, am I going to die? Especially in the middle of the night when no one's around, and I have some things on my record, like I could die here, I may never make it to jail, so, and that's ultimately what ended up happening. So I don't know, it's hard to say, like, if the taser was the right application and if it had anything to do with race, but it still exposes the unbalance in experience.
Yeah. And these are the things that we hope would disappear. Incidents like this, it's probably a barometer of how race relations are. Yeah.
No, but how can we combat racism then? How can we make things better, right? So how would that work? Do you guys think that anything is being done to make racism better in the United States and in the world as well? Or not?
Yeah, personally, I think knowing lots of people of different races, like not just one, but like knowing, like speaking to a whole bunch of people from different races is kind of one of the best antidotes to racism.
Yeah.
More than taking like implicit bias training. So like,
oh no,
I'm not sure, like because I believe implicit bias is a real thing, right? I think there's a lot of evidence for it. And they take, there are certain classes you can take, or, certain jobs will offer training on implicit bias. But I think that doesn't replace actually knowing people of different races and just, hanging out with them frequently.
I agree with that. I think, like, for example, my kids, I don't think they have implicit biases like I do. They just grew up we made sure that they grew up in a situation where they meet all sorts of people. Probably did hurt that they went to an ultra liberal East Coast college, but I mean, it helped, not that it didn't help. It didn't hurt. Yeah, but I have faith that the country is going in the right direction. I hope it'll go there faster. I keep telling my kids, when we boomers die out, you'll probably be in a better place, especially with respect to the environment, with respect to to race relations and things like that. I don't know if that's just my little corner of the world, but it looks like, if you look at the voter breakdowns in the last presidential election by age groups, then certainly room for a lot of optimism, the way they voted, as you look at the younger and younger age groups. It's so that's my, what I tell them. just wait and hope the climate doesn't go to pot in the meantime.
So you
You
guys
know,
basically think, let's just hang back and wait, and it will get better.
Hang back and of course try to fight off the the Trump voters. Can I put it that way?
Put it any way you like.
That's
half of the country, man.
Yeah.
It's-
Well,
Why?
maybe only about 30% are really, really hardcore. Others are winnable. They just go along with as long as most people are.
What about
I think-
police brutality? Is it the same thing? Just time will resolve it, or?
I think-
Would you say like is there police brutality in Russia? We kind of asked you this question, but like disregard the racism part. Like in terms of the police brutality, do you think that's something that people experience, or like is that a debate as well?
Well, I think it may be a problem, but I don't see it. As I said, like I'm quite ignorant about this topic. That's why I'm basically silent. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, I'm sorry, man. You're a little bit bored. I'm sorry. And you can go back to bed if you want.
No. It's quite interesting to listen to what you say and like to educate myself on this issue, be more aware of what's going on. But again, it's like in Russia, as I said, it's a mild problem. It's not so big as in America. Though in '90s, I remember when I was a kid, it was more difficult, maybe because of my subjective experience. But when I was at school, we had people from Armenia, from this like.
Can I just
interrupt? But again, it's like it was more tense, and people who like in this city in Kaluga, there were like these people were mostly on high positions, so they had like business, money, government. They like they controlled lots of things here, and there were lots of talks that we should get rid of these people. That they.
Oh, I'm not leaving. Sorry.
Yeah, but now it looks as if it was kind of in like it wasn't because it was real, but it was because I was just a little kid and could believe everything I was told by people who was older or by news or by media. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay.
Police, I guess it's everywhere. Like everywhere, police behaves in a way when it's not just towards people who are of different color, but like I guess for police, it's just kind of inner bias that if I'm a policeman, I'm kind of superior and I may do I may do more than actually may be done. I mean, like if you're a policeman, you feel yourself kind of, I have more. If there's something wrong, I'm certainly feel superior to, to act according to laws. Like it's not just acting according to laws. Like if I'm a policeman, I am law. So I know better what should be done, and I may treat you basically not as a human being, but as a criminal. And if you're a criminal, probably I may do like things which otherwise will be impossible to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a difficult job. I mean, it's a difficult job to have, also because you have all this power. So when you give people power in life, I mean, it's difficult for them to not use that power, and especially in the case of policemen, that they think they need to use that power at times, So
yeah, it's like,
really confusing position to be in, that you have all this power that you also think that you need to use, and then people will blame you for using it, you know?
It was prison experiment. I know how. Are you familiar with?
Yes, but you can talk about it a little bit. But not everybody will be familiar with it, I don't think.
Yeah, and basically they created kind of game, so it wasn't real. So they put 10. I don't know how many. It was 5 prisoners, 5 guards, and they told them that you just need to play a role. It's not real, but you just need to pretend that you're a prisoner or you are a guard, and things go so badly. After a few days, guards started humiliating prisoners, like doing stuff which wasn't appropriate, and yeah, eventually like the whole film turned like all this issue of violence and bad treatment just because of but they describe it in terms of in a situation we may be just good people, right? But if we are placed in a situation where I have more power, when I may do something to you and there's no consequences, it's like quite likely that it may happen that I'll abuse you, and just because I have more power, and I just in my nature, it's kind of the thing which I may even be not aware of this, but still it depends on the situation.
Yeah, I think especially men in particular. I think women don't have this quite as much, but we are violent creatures. Like men, without being controlled, men turn nasty really fast. And you see this, like for example, in war, right? I mean, soldiers go crazy when there are no restrictions. Like you see, like atrocities left and right. I mean, it's like a commonplace thing that happens pretty much every time. Like we're talking about before the video started, we were talking about Vikings and pirates. I mean, Vikings and pirates, like they didn't hold back like one bit. Like if they found themselves in a position of power, they would just completely abuse other human beings. There was no there's no holding back at all. So it's a minority of people really who don't have that problem of just abusing their power when they have power.
Yeah,
I think the good thing now. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go on.
I was just gonna say, I think the good thing nowadays is that we have body cams, so the police's power is checked at least a little bit, because I don't know if it's after every single incident or after some incidents, but there's like the guy that examines the use of force on the body cam and makes a determination of whether or not it's appropriate, and that sort of goes on the officer's record. So that's kind of like a check on the policeman's power.
So it's
It might
something.
not. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say it might not always be super effective, but it's somewhat of a check.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, what about cases where it gets turned off? Like, that's pretty much immediately suspicious, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't know why they would do that. Like, what would motivate, what would make you look better than just leaving your cam on? Like,
I don't really remember the details. I just remember hearing about these things happening. Like, okay, I don't remember the details, but are people claiming it was by accident or something?
I don't know. That seems so unlikely.
Well, it's for sure like it's a great tool. I agree, Michael. It's that way. It's like you need checks and balances, right? The more checks and balances you have, the more you can limit someone's power, and that can be politically, that can be in terms of the police. I mean, it's that's the only thing you can do in terms of I think police brutality is like you have to impose limits and to what they can do or cannot do. And the tricky thing is like if you impose too many limits, they might not be that effective, right? So that's the other side of the coin. but and also different practices, right? I think like, for example, the whole I think one reason why there are so many shootings is that policemen in the United States are, and I'm not saying this is necessarily wrong. I understand why they do it. Well, I think it's wrong, but I understand why they do it. They use their guns a lot, you know, like when they're like a lot, in a lot of situations, their training tells them to either be holding their gun, pointing their gun. And when you're pointing your gun at someone, you might kill that person, right? I mean, it can happen. So yeah, so the training could maybe change a little bit to avoid some of these instances.
Can I tell a story?
Yeah.
So when we moved in here a number of years ago, like 6 years ago or something like that, I think it was last year. There was an incident across the street, and there were a number of squad cars out, and then eventually some SWAT teams, and all night long, these police officers sat outside this house where a man was having some kind of a PTSD attack or something like that. And all night long, they sat on their loudspeaker with the block surrounded, telling him to put down his weapons and come out. And they would go on that loudspeaker every 60 seconds, maybe 2 minutes max. All night long, they talked to this man. They tried to coordinate. They went up to the door. They threw a phone in to try and communicate with this one dude inside a house. The people he was staying with had evacuated because he was getting weird. And they spent the whole night trying to preserve his life, basically. Eventually, they took him out in a body bag. Apparently there had been like I don't know, there was some kind of incident on the inside. I don't know if he had put some traps up. He was a vet. But that is what, like, that's what respect for life looks like. It's putting in all your effort, trying everything, all the skills that you've learned to preserve the life. And that is not even close to equal. So it's like they have the training, but they don't apply it to the other people. And how do you fix something like that? And I don't know. I think it's educating about the value. It's somehow educating about the value of all life. And I think if you're going to give somebody a weapon, maybe there needs to be just education about the value of all lives.
Well, but that's not something you can teach someone. I mean, that's something that
maybe it is, though. Maybe we could come up with a way to teach it. Maybe we can. If there's not a way to teach it, then maybe we need to have better discretion on who we give weapons to. Maybe there's just a test. If you can't teach it, maybe there's a test, a psychological test about how to. I don't know, but I think we've got all this technology, we've got all this medical knowledge, we've got all this psychology. Like, if we cared enough, I think we could come up with something, because the difference is vast in the amount of care and time invested in preserving one life or another.
I wish we heard more stories like you mentioned about police officers who did like a really good job of something, like, because you won't ever hear that, right? But what if it
was exhausting for everybody within earshot, but they really tried.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So maybe we need to take stories of officers that handled the case really well, and maybe we need to make that national news, and maybe that'll encourage officers to act better. I guess.
I agree with you. In From my perspective, the practical motto of every news organization successful: if it bleeds, it leads. And if it's not bad news, it doesn't make the grade.
Yeah.
You know, you never hear news stories that say 137,000 people escaped extreme poverty today.
Mhm.
But that could have been the lead story every single day for the last 25 years.
Mm.
Well,
But you don't hear about that.
not only that, that's true, and that's very unfortunate, but it's also true that, and I don't even like to say this because a lot of people say this in a very stupid way, but I do think that, well, honestly, it's true. But what I'm going to
You'll
say,
say it better though, I'm sure.
well, I'm not going to say it better, but I'll say it with a better intention. I believe that the media has also a problem with leading people's opinion. I think, and that's a real problem today. You know, they are not presenting the news in a way that I think would be reasonable to present. You know, they're leading people. It's like in a court of law, you can't ask the questions telling people what to answer, right? Like that's you're presenting the information in a way that you're conditioning the way the person is going to interpret it. This is exactly what the media is doing in a lot of these cases. And I do think, like, even though I don't agree with the interpretation of like these ultra conservative people that, oh, it's all fake news and all that, that's not at all what I'm saying here. But what I am saying is that there is an element of the media leading people, like, consistently in a number of
Yeah.
different cases. And it can
I-
be leading, actually, just to balance things out a little bit, it can be leading to either side, but there's a lot of leading that I would really think that that's not okay. People should be giving the facts, and they should decide, but not be led to believe something, like, that's not okay, in my opinion.
Well, I understand what you're saying. And when I express that sentiment, I avoid the word control, because control, you didn't use that word, but I avoid that word because control implies a conscious thought. And I don't think there's any consciousness behind it at all, which in many ways is even worse. But
Well, I think they are, it's almost like they're scared to be wrong at this point, like there's in a lot of these debates, like, depending on your base, like you either have to have this opinion or the other one. If you say the wrong thing, then whoa, then you're in trouble, right? Like, you can lose your job or whatever, you can lose ratings if you're higher up. So they are very careful to lead to the right way that will be consistent with all the other media as well that are in kind of like the same category.
yeah,
But
I,
they try to play it safe, but they are all doing this, and
I,
and,
I,
and
I
people
under,
cannot have an intelligent process. They can process information intelligently.
I understand what you're saying, and I agree. Uh, my wife and I, often watch NBC Nightly News, and we really like Lester Holt. I think he's a good guy, but he's not just an anchor man. He's the managing editor of the NBC Nightly News. And so he decides what goes on, what's worthy and what's not. And I was really shocked to find out that not only Lester, but David Muir and the CBS person as well, on the day that polio in the wild was wiped out in the entire continent of Africa, they didn't consider that worthy of the evening news. And I realize it doesn't bleed, but to me, that was newsworthy. And they didn't report it at all.
Yeah, they report what sells, and what sells right now is it's what's controversial, right? Like if there's a potential for racist police killing, that's controversial. That's gonna sell. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand what sells and what doesn't, generally speaking. So that's why they love Trump so much. They said they didn't love Trump, but I bet the guys, up
No, they
love
did.
it. Free money for everybody all the time. And then maybe towards the end, it was a little bit too much. But, for a while, they were just riding the wave. People are like, they had to listen to it, and it doesn't really matter if it's good for society or not, whatever it is. It's unfortunate. That's so many things that are wrong about capitalism, unfortunately. Many
The
things
only
are good,
problem-
but the news for profit, unfortunately, has created a problem, which is you can only really report what is sensationalist.
The only problem with that technically is that should people be able to decide what they would prefer to listen to?
I don't think we can escape that. I think they already do.
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. Like, while some people would like certain organizations to not sell basically what they're selling, it probably makes more sense to try to create something neutral than to tell people they shouldn't be picking the content that they're picking. While yes, I think we would say that they're indoctrinating themselves or brainwashing themselves or just basically keeping themselves ignorant of both sides of the coin. Do people have a right to keep their biases, and do they have a right to consume sensational content? Yes. So bad journalism, while I think it's a tragedy,
it seems to me, in keeping with what you're saying, that the only tool we have is persuasion.
right?
Maybe it's not good for you to only watch Fox News all the time.
Right.
Maybe it's not good for you to only watch MSNBC all the time.
Right. So it's all well and good to create something that's genuinely neutral, but if nobody genuinely wants it enough to pay for it, like, it's kind of a lost cause.
Well, I don't think it's not that. Like I said, it's more like the model of capitalism in this case is what the problem is. It's not so much that people don't want it. Like, I mean, frankly, like most people do not have, like, they're not like too bothered to like develop like critical thinking and think about things like in a very like conscientious manner, in a very rational manner. Like most people are. They think in more or less binary terms or more or less simple terms, and that's just that's kind of like the way it goes. That's the majority of people. But in general, it's a good idea not to try to create mobs, and mob thinking is like, it escalates that tendency, right? Because when you get to mob thinking, then it gets really bad. It's really binary. It's like In the case of racism, for example, right now in the police is like Black Lives Matter extreme or Blue Lives Matter extreme, and that's, when you get to the mob thinking, you're in trouble. So like,
But where's the line between giving people what they want and maybe what they want is a mob?
no,
Maybe what they
nobody
want.
wants a mob because it's terrible. Like the end
I
consequence
know.
of
Do you
mob
know that
thinking is
though?
never good.
Do you know that nobody wants to be part of a mob?
Well, maybe nobody. I'm not going to generalize, but most people, I think, would prefer to live in a more or less, like reasonable society, and
Not so
like,
sure.
well,
It's really what I kind of liked during the George Floyd trial was watching the jury selection in the beginning. And I feel like it kind of revealed, I mean, I guess that everyone in it is kind of trying to act unbiased, maybe so they'll get picked. I don't know. But I feel like it shows that, like, because the people they interview when they're doing the jury selection, they're completely randomly selected from the population, right? And none of them, like when they were asked questions by the lawyers, like acted super like pro Black Lives Matter or like super pro police, or like when you heard their answers, most of them were like a reasonable middle ground between the two, right? So I feel like that is most people, I feel like. And then there's some people, farther on one end and some people farther on the other end. But yeah, the jury selection just gave a nice random sample of people, which I liked.
well, there's also an element to that. I don't know if it's part of that because I don't know a lot of the details about the case and the jury and all that. But they pick the jury as well, and
Yeah.
the American system. So like they have to agree that it's a good jury, both the prosecution and the defense. So that might be, they probably started out with not that number. Is it 12, right? It didn't start with 12, I think it starts with 30, 40. I think it starts with a bunch of people, and then
Yeah, but you
they
could
start
hear them
from two.
interview all of the 30 or 40 before selecting the 12.
Oh, okay, fine, yeah. Then yeah, I don't know. Then yeah, that's good, I guess. Yeah. Maybe they were trying to be as impartial as possible, which if that's the case, that's good, right? I mean, that's good news.
I was thinking this seems like a hard case to find unbiased jurors for.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big division,
And yeah, I read normally they'd try, like normally they'd will try, or they'll have jurors who haven't heard of the trial before, but that was basically impossible in this case.
Yeah, they try to find people. I think a few of the people had never seen the video. A few of the jurors when doing the case, but I think some of them had seen the video. But yeah, the judge like asks them, "Can you put aside what you've seen previously?" And of course, I don't know if that's like physically possible, like biologically possible to just pretend you haven't seen something. But yeah, they try to get people that like hadn't spoken too much to their like friends or family about it, so they could get like their own opinion on it.
Yeah. I think like the best thing would to advance towards like a post-racial, sort of a colorblind society in the world. Like I'm not really sure why like ethnicity or like race, like why those things like matter all that much anymore. Like before they really did in the Americas. I mean, it was it really mattered if you're white or black, because you would end up on one side or the other of society. But now that everybody has the same rights theoretically, it's really more like it is what it's in people's minds that is holding back really equality. And then yes, you can make the argument that there are economic infrastructures that are different and all that is true. But going forward, I certainly believe it would do it would do a lot more good to kind of like to try to eliminate all these differences as much as possible than not, instead of like insisting on them. But I don't know what's necessarily holding people back or holding society back. Well, I know one thing, like there's always this need to categorize in the United States. There's always a need to categorize people by race. I mean, you can't like do anything without if you like if you have to answer some questionnaire, they'll ask you what race you belong to, like it's that constant need to categorize people racially. I think that's like tremendously counterproductive. For example, that's one thing that I can think of.
For psychological health, creating boundaries of what you are not and what you cannot do is actually really important. It's really important for development as a child to not have to wrestle with literally all of the problems that are available, and all of the consequences and all of the gravity of choices, and like not have all of those possibilities at your doorstep is a security thing. It's a stability thing. So being able to distinguish what you are, what your worth is, by what you are not, is a really natural, stabilizing psychological situation. But like, how do you keep people from creating their security by marginalizing another people based on their skin? The how is the hard part. The why is actually a really primitive kind of
But I'm
helpful explanation.
I'm not really sure. Like, I understand what you just said. Like, you're saying that it's very productive to categorize people.
Right. A while back we talked about like tribalism. So understanding, I'm saying when it comes to family unit stability, or even individual psychological stability, being able to define yourself and distinguish yourself from others is hugely beneficial, as opposed to saying, like we said, like not knowing your gender when everybody else knows when everybody else knows their gender, and not being able to discern what that is, not being able to confine what defines you, is really hard existence to deal with psychologically. So by saying, I am not this, I don't identify with this, they are something else, the foreignness is a threat to my psychological stability. And it's just the foreignness. It's, like I said, super primitive, super instinctual, stabilizing method, is identifying foreign factor means I will have to question everything that works for me right now. And so counteracting something that's inherently stabilizing is hard. You basically have to teach people to have emotional stability despite emotional threat. You have to untrain this really basic way of functioning emotionally.
It sounds very deep and sort of psychoanalytic, but yeah. But I'm glad you brought up the example of like struggling with like even like your gender identity, because it's not necessarily like, I guess maybe I haven't thought about this enough, but it's not necessarily like people are like, I'm physically male, but I know I'm a woman. Like they're struggling with the question, right? And it's often not a pleasant struggle, because it's like you're trying to figure out where you fit, and it's like there's like a level of discomfort in doing that. But yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. But I'm sorry, I was gonna say something else quick.
Well, were you going to say something, David? Because I don't want to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, I didn't understand everything that you said, Natasha, but I think I might understand some of it. If I were a minority child, black child in the 50s or 60s, during my developing years, I would not have, it would never have occurred to me that I could grow up to be president. And that has changed now. But I wonder how that affected minority children in the 50s and 60s during their developing years to view themselves in that way, if it damaged them psychologically.
Like they could never rise up to that level of greatness or even
Yeah,
close, kind of.
yeah.
I mean, it's
I don't know. It's just I wonder.
I bet it sucked, you know, but that's like, if you, that would be probably kind of realistic at that point, you know, because that just wasn't a possibility. But then, you know, you have someone like Obama, you know, and he became president. But that's the thing. That's how stupid I think this categorization system is. Obama is not a black person, you know. Yeah, he's been labeled as a black person because honestly, because, you know, it's a racist system of thinking. You know, it comes from the racial laws that, you know, if you had even a little bit of black in you, then no, you're not white, you're not white. Oh, sorry, you gotta sit over there, you know. That's like, that's racism. Like, that's a very, but that was on purpose. That was a system that they built because they had to differentiate themselves from slaves, you know. And it's a horrible thing, but that's reality. But Obama is not living in a slave society, you know, a society of less slaves and masters. It's stupid to call him a black person at this point because, you know, he's half black. Why don't they call him white, right? I mean, that's what bothers me, because it's still a very racist way of thinking.
But in some ways, it kind of helps solve, like, if you didn't categorize people at all, then you wouldn't be able to identify the problem of racism, right? Because you wouldn't have statistics on it, I guess.
Well, but you wouldn't have the problem. You wouldn't have the problem. So if you just acknowledge that Obama is like part black, you know, he has partially African ancestry and he has partially European ancestry, and he's a human, right? I mean, that should be good enough. Like, in my opinion, I mean, that should be good enough. And then you acknowledge that, yeah, I mean, his ancestors came from, is that so different from someone who has ancestors from Ireland and Italy, you know, like, or from Poland and
Red hair and black hair.
yeah, or, you know, like, does that really matter? Does that, like, I understand that it mattered in the American South in 1810, you know, that mattered very, very much. But now it only matters in people's minds. And that's why I'm saying, like, this categorization, I understand why you're saying that he has some, but I think overall, I mean, it's like, and it can be good or bad, but look, it can go to extreme cases when the categorization means you're going to be killed, you know, like in Nazi Germany. Oh no, that person, well, I think your grandmother was Jewish, so maybe you have to, you know, or Rwanda. Oh, your nose looks a little bit funny, so maybe you're a Tutsi, you know. Like, these things matter, like, a lot, right? Because you either live or die. And then you have a whole bunch of stuff like in between, and then you have stuff that seems innocuous, but it's never really innocuous. That's kind of my point, you know. You're still categorizing people, you're still making those divisions, and you never know where this is going to go in the future. You never know. Like, maybe what doesn't matter now too much maybe will matter in 20 years from now, you know, if the political situation is a little bit different. I think it would be a lot more productive if we really want to get past this stuff. I mean, just to start assuming that people are humans and have different types of ancestry, and that's it.
Yes, but how?
Well, it's not actually that complicated.
Like you said, it's so natural. It's so natural to do that because of the the way early Homo sapien like value of sticking together and bonding and loyalty and protecting the pack, protecting the tribe, like the instinct is there. So how do we educate people out of that?
But the thing is that, sorry, go ahead.
I don't know how we do it all, but this could be one aspect of a solution. Martin Luther King Jr., when he spoke, he tried to draw a circle around us all. In other words, he was not saying black people this or white people that. He was saying we all have these values. And this is how we realize those values, how we realize our aspirations. We today, as we often hear, America is a divided country. And to me, I think that to a certain extent, we have forgotten that it is possible for us to disagree about how much government it is safe to have, and neither one of us be evil. But too often today, we are told that we believe, maybe not we're told, but we believe that anybody who doesn't see things exactly as I do must be evil. And we can't read their minds. When did we start thinking we could read each other's minds? I don't get that.
A lot of people think they can read each other's minds. That's true.
Yeah.
Kind of something a little bit crazy to assume. It's not helpful.
So yeah, but I guess like you're saying like the problem wouldn't exist if we didn't have like forms where we check our race or whatever. But I mean, people would still discriminate based on the color of people's skin, right? Like there would just still be discrimination. Some people would just look at other people's skin and based on that discriminate, right? So I guess it kind of helps you put a metric around, but like it kind of allows you to get at certain metrics that you can use to help quantify the problem, right?
Well, yes and no, because you're right to some extent. Like you look at like if someone's like looks clearly okay, like they have African ancestry, sure, you can tell, like, yeah, if you have a bias against black people, yeah, you're gonna have that bias. But it's not the case for everybody, like, and also it's not just about that. It's about the fact that you have to think about it so much, like all the time you're being reminded. It's very different being in a society where, sure, yeah, you can look at people and sort of kind of guess where they're from. In some cases, in some cases it's more clear than others, but it's a very different situation. And I can tell you, like, from personal experience, like I had, I had never really thought about what race people were, it's not something that I was like constantly thinking about, and certainly not what race I was, like it had really never crossed my mind. Like this whole thing of trying to like come up with like what is someone's race, whatever that is, which is like, anyways, it's very stupid in a lot of cases. But like just that exercise, that constant exercise of trying to determine like if that person is in that box, if that person is in that box, like that is a very complete, it's a completely different way of thinking than just like going with the fact that, yeah, I mean, people look different,
And
it's a different thing. It's not the same.
In some circles, just asking somebody where they're from is a racist question.
Yeah.
I don't get that. I mean,
I think if you ask somebody if they're from America,
yeah.
when
Well,
you're in America,
I guess
that's when it becomes racist, not where are you from?
yeah.
Maybe
I
within
guess
the
I
states
guess
or nearby.
the thing to me is coming up with the worst possible explanation for why somebody might ask that.
Hmm.
You know, and completely ignoring all of the innocuous, courteous things that people might have for asking such a question.
Hmm.
And also, I mean, the world is not the United States, right? I also think that this applies to the world in general. Like, you know, and I keep bringing this up, but I mean, this is like, I really don't understand like why people cannot just understand that, you know, we're all humans, you know, and look, we have different ancestries, but really we all came from Africa to start with, you know, like, so it's not like that we're that different. I mean, Native Americans, American Indians only started to develop, I think now they think it's 12,000 years ago. That's really not even that long that you know, that we even moved to the Americas in the first place. I mean, all these divisions are really just a matter of people going to different places. And this was all, by the way, it was all before globalization. That's why people developed in different ways. That's never going to happen again in the future of mankind because we're globalized now. So really the only like, if you look at the future, the only like feasible race for men, for humankind is really humankind, you know, Homo sapiens, you know, it's the only thing that is feasible. All these divisions are like really circumstantial things. So
I think our continued antagonism about this issue, not here, but in humanity as a whole, may be an answer to the Fermi paradox that, you know, galactic civilizations are just avoiding us till we get all of this straightened out.
look, in the 20th century, that's like imagine like the aliens looking at us in the 20th century, because we were really going through a crisis in the 20th century. Like the Nazis were very concerned with this, like some of the other fascists was very concerned with this, the Japanese were very concerned with this, like the South Africans were obsessed with, you know, like, well, who's white, who's black, like where they gonna go, you know, the south of the United States kind of like did the same thing. Look, everybody was like really, really, really obsessed with these really tiny, like the Rwandans even like, it was really by the shape of your nose what it looked like, that you're gonna go like into one tribe or the other. There are completely different kinds of humans, which like the whole thing was made up. Like in Yugoslavia, the Serbians, the Bosnians, and then the Croatians, which were, you know, like the all of these divisions, if you look at it from the perspective of an alien, they're, you know, they're absolutely idiotic.
Why are we assuming that aliens don't have these issues?
Well, maybe they have these issues, but they're looking at
Maybe they
outside
do.
from the outside, and they're looking
Maybe
at us.
aliens who find us are the Nazis who
Well,
won.
let me put it this way. The likelihood that an intelligent alien civilization would be way more advanced than us is extremely high.
Yeah, if they're able to get here, they'll look at us like monkeys. So they're, you know,
and if you have an intelligent species that is millions of years ahead of us, they're probably saying, we don't want anything to do with that planet.
What if they find us so entertaining that they don't want to disturb it? Like they're watching us like a TV.
you know,
what?
somebody asked that
It's one of their
question.
friends.
Somebody asked that question on Facebook. I think it was like one of the Davids, not David.
That's what made me ask the question, was that comment. But yeah.
Yeah, no, and the answer was someone answered that no, it would be terribly boring because we keep making the same mistakes again and again. It's very repetitive. which is very true. Like
Right.
we're very cyclical, and we keep making the same mistakes again and again and again. No, it's,
No, I don't.
well,
I don't know.
but
I think if and when we actually encounter aliens, I don't think it's. I think it's just going to expose our narcissism,
well,
where we're not actually something to avoid. We're also not something to conquer. We're also not something to be entertaining. Like,
Yeah.
we're just not that special.
well,
Yeah.
it depends on the aliens. You know, if we go by sci-fi, you can go a number of different ways, very different ways.
Mhm.
But I mean, I wouldn't want to be a human if I wasn't a human. Like, I don't have a choice. But I mean, we're pretty, stupid species. I mean, the way we treat each other, I mean, it's very, very stupid.
There are some good ones. There's some good apples.
Yeah, but as a whole, humanity is like incredibly stupid.
I mean, but again, if we were going to look at the alien species, maybe it's relative. Maybe we're figuring our stuff out relatively quickly. Maybe it's like calling a 6-year-old stupid because they break their toys when there's being attacked on, and a different 6-year-old doesn't break their toys.
I don't know. I don't know if that's quickly. I think we're taking a whole lot of time to.
Well, I'm just saying, maybe judging ourselves is pretty pointless when we don't have anything to compare ourselves as a race to.
Well, generally speaking, like I can imagine like a different kind of human that is a little bit smarter. That would be a whole lot smarter. Like, for example, like just it's common sense. Like our species seems to lack all common sense. Like we're right now we're destroying the planet, and we're all gonna die if we keep doing the same things that we're doing right now, and we keep doing them.
Like, but intelligent doesn't mean
common sense is. Like, we have no common sense. I was watching this documentary yesterday about how Miami is sinking, essentially.
But intelligent doesn't mean compassionate, and also intelligent doesn't mean not self-interest. You could be intelligent, but I want my money right now, but I'm very, very smart. Like intelligence.
That's not intelligence, though. That's not intelligence as a species. If you can't understand that if we're all gonna die, like if you get your money now, I mean, how intelligent is that?
Yeah, but the thing is, it's game theory. So it's like, if you don't think you can really do much to affect it, because like if you're just self-concerned and you're not willing to partner with like the rest of humans to solve the problem, you just want what you want right now, then you could be like really intelligent, but you're just trying to figure out how to get what you want. Like, I mean, yeah, I don't think intelligent means like you want the long-term good of humanity. Yeah.
Every virtue has another side of the coin. So every positive aspect has a negative side. So capitalism is very individualistic, and that breeds innovation and ambition, which are great things. But it's also really selfish. But being generous, being a team player can mean that you're settling for the status quo, that things go really slowly and you don't leave anybody behind. And like having common sense, being practical is great, but you can leave things like compassion behind, or you can leave like emotional aspects behind if you're too practical. So I think, like, I don't know, like if we actually had a parallel species that we could be comparing ourselves against, then maybe we could say we're doing a really shitty job. But we've,
Or if
I mean,
all the
we've
other species
progressed
could
very
speak,
No,
if
but
all the other
quickly.
species
we-
could speak,
we-
they would tell us to go somewhere else. Go to Mars with Elon Musk. Leave us alone.
we can compare ourselves to people of the past.
Hmm.
I thought you would say that.
They're even more stupid, so I guess we're not that bad compared to them. So
There you go.
yeah, but that's
There you go.
they also didn't know what we know.
It's arduous task to bring the whole average up. Like, you have to look at every individual factor and assess the weakness of every individual factor that's keeping the average down. You have to like lift it all up slowly, and it takes so much time, and it's hard to wait. But
Anyways, we have to
I
let
think we're doing okay.
Vladimir he needs to go to bed. He needs to go to bed because it's too late in Russia. We gotta let him sleep. Vladimir, I don't know how you didn't fall asleep because you're not even like that interested in this topic, and you're like hurt.
No, I'm interested, but I don't have much to say. That's not the same as you're not interested. Actually,
Let's say it's
pretty
maybe.
exciting.
Do you think it's
listening to-
mildly interesting? Mildly interesting, maybe. Somewhat
Yeah.
interesting.
I do think that we touched on something that might make an interesting topic for another night. Is
I'm like an alien observant.
yeah,
Alien observations. Yeah.
yeah.
Craig would love that.
How would humanity react if an intelligent alien species contacted us? You know,
Mm.
that's a good question, I think.
Yeah, I've heard maybe we could send them music because like we don't speak the same language, right? So maybe we'd want to try to communicate with them somehow.
Yeah, that's a good
What if-
question. How would we communicate with
What
them?
if they have like pets and their pets make music?
Or how do we even know they have
Just like
ears?
just come across sounding like dogs barking, and that's what they hear when they hear.
Okay.
Like,
They would think we're like
"Oh,
their pets. Yeah.
my fish makes this noise in the morning. Oh, isn't that cute? It's
Well,
adorable.
I mean, that's like it would be sort of like when the Spaniards, for example, when they landed on the first islands in the Caribbean, like how did they speak to the natives? That's kind of a weird situation, I guess, because nobody speaks anybody's language.
Mm.
I mean, the Spaniards, I think mostly they just decided that they were just gonna, enslave. But so it didn't take a whole lot of communication for that. But maybe they did want to talk to them at first and they just couldn't like figure out. I'm being a little bit like I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, but I don't know. Like it is a weird situation if you have no way of understanding what the other person wants to tell you or telling them what you want to tell. Like it's a difficult
A lot
situation.
of pointing. You'll get to this in about a year and a half.
Or maybe if they're that
You'll
smart,
figure this out firsthand, Bruno.
Firsthand. Okay.
A lot of pointing and a lot of just back and forth.
no, but think about
sound
it.
expression. Yeah.
If they're smart enough to figure out how to travel here, then maybe they could just figure out themselves what we mean. We'll just keep talking as we talk, and they're smart enough to figure it out.
Maybe.
Yeah, true. In that case, they would probably already speak all of our languages by the time they got here because they probably had the time to figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be a problem. It was a problem.
Unless they
for
were
the-
like the first civilization they encountered.
No,
maybe.
they would have studied it beforehand, maybe.
What makes you think that? What if we're the first ones?
Because we have media, right? So they would be, they would have like little aliens listening to this video and coming up with systems to understand what language we're speaking. And they would do this for every YouTube video. So they would probably speak all the languages, by the time they got here.
There's like a lot of assumptions there. Natasha's like,
Yeah, they would.
Yeah.
They would communicate.
Well, I'm just thinking about
They would
us, our
communicate in
astronomers.
like perfect English,
Yeah.
perfect French, perfect
I
Spanish.
think about our astronomers. I think about or astronauts. Like when what do we focus on? We focus on getting to space. We focus on getting as far as we can. We don't focus on any equipment on what to do once we get there. We get there first, and then we figure out how to deal with it.
Again, we're not that smart. They would be smarter.
Well,
well, with the moon, when we landed on the moon, like they took precautions to make sure, like, because they didn't know what chemicals might be in the moon dust. So they like wore like gloves and like did a bunch of, but like they wanted to take some of the moon dust back with them. But they put in like a careful container, and then they quarantined themselves for like a couple weeks after they landed. So they took some precautions, but yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But precaution for what you can anticipate is different than knowing what to anticipate and then taking preventative measures or actually addressing what you're going to encounter.
Anyways, let's
all right.
let's
Getting ahead of
do
ourselves.
you guys have like final remarks, stuff that you want to say before we end this, so Vladimir can go to bed?
Not much more. That's about it.
Like final thoughts on how we can make things better regarding racism and police brutality.
Yeah, I think implicit bias is a real thing, but I think it's not something you can sort of learn academically. Or I'm kind of skeptical that it's like an intellectual thing that you can fix in yourself. I think it's something you fix through experience and just meeting lots of different types of people. That's my final remark.
Agree. Is that it?
I would say research and statistics and using more of our social media and app creation, stuff like that, to actually gather data so that we can get a real scope of what we're dealing with in the first place. So then we can create a plan once we know what we actually have. Because I think it's really underrepresented, it's really underreported, and like we don't have the information that we need to create like really meaningful, effective plans. So.
Yeah, so hopefully Zuckerberg will listen to this video.
Mm-hmm.
In our daily lives, drawing a circle big enough to encompass all of humanity. That seems to me what we should try to do.
Martin Luther King, I'm all for it.
I like it. Yeah, I'm not gonna repeat what I said before, but yeah, I think thinking post those stupid divisions, I think would really be the way, in my opinion. Instead of like focusing on them all the time. What do you think, Vladimir? Do you have any final thoughts? It can be about something else if you give us a poem if you want.
A poem?
No,
Yeah.
anything. Like if you don't want to say anything, you don't need to.
No, I don't know. I
Okay.
don't know what to say.
All right.
All right, I'm gonna stop recording. Thanks for listening, guys. If anyone
Carol have anything to say?
No, Vladimir doesn't want to say anything.
Oh, Carolyn.
Carolyn. Okay,
I think I'm good. I can't think of anything else right now.
All right. Well, thanks for listening.